Hey, and welcome back to this episode. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be addressing one of the biggest issues that I'm facing when it comes to starting an expert business, and that is feeling like I'm not an expert. It's a really valid feeling of inadequacy. If any of you have done anything for the first time, then you know what I'm talking about. A lot of the times you feel like you're not adequate. Okay, like the first girl you hit on, you probably felt like you're not adequate, or you are, they're way above your class, or so to speak, they're way above you, or the first time like you rode a bike, you were scared that you probably fall. And so I've come, I've come to accept that this is a natural response when it comes to trying something new, and it is okay. These feelings of inadequacy normally crop up, but they shouldn't stop you. So don't. So it's okay if you don't feel like an expert yet. And it's one of the biggest roadblocks on your path to becoming an expert. And here's the thing: you're not alone. I'm right there with you. Even as I do this, I am totally scared of even doing this. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of millions, probably even millions, that feel this way, and that is why not everybody's not everybody's a business owner. Otherwise, the entire earth would be full of business owners. But that's the problem. Not everyone is a business owner. So because most people, they face the first roadblock and they just cave in. But I decided I'm just going to do it, and I'm just going to do it scared. Okay, I'm just going to do it scared. Nonetheless, the goal is to actually get something done, not just becoming a thinker, but a doer. Okay, and so even the greatest mind, the greatest people that you know, from Steve Harvey, Russell Brunson, Robert Kiyosaki, and all these other big names, even Kevin Hart, and Dwayne the Rock Johnson, all these people, they were new to whatever their professions was at some point in their life for the first time. I could imagine like Kevin Hart when you're starting becoming a comedian, or you stood on stage for the first time to actually, I don't know what they're called, but when you stood on the stage to create comedy, you're probably nervous and didn't feel like a comedian yet. You know what I mean? You just feel like you're not a comedian yet, but nevertheless, he did it, and he did it over several decades, and it's led him to the star that he is right now. It's made him to that star that he is right now. And so you're not alone in this thing. Everybody has started their first time. The difference is that they did it scared, and that is how I'm going to do it as well. I'm going to do it scared, so it is okay. Even if you're scared, you're just going to do it scared. Now, in the last episode, we talked about rediscovering your expertise. And, we talked about, there are a couple of questions which I laid out for you guys on, that would help you come up, or that I used personally to come up with, the areas of my expertise, or the areas that I can become an expert in. And so right now you should have probably a list of several things, at least 10 minimum, of things that you probably relatively good at, or you're remotely interested in. I have mine, and this is the whole point of this channel is just I'm just showing you guys how exactly I came up with this channel and how I'm actually doing this. And so by now you should have a list of the things that you're relatively good at, or even remotely interested in. And so I have my own, and this is why I'm starting this channel. And so I picked on this niche. So remember, now one thing I like for you guys to remember, that is, this is not a life sentence. Okay, it's not like a marriage, or or a contract where you have to stick to the thing that you've picked for the next, for the rest of your lives. No, because as human beings, we tend to evolve. We don't stick to the same thing all the time. If you look at your life, you'll find that the things that you're interested in as a kid are the same things you're interested in when you're as a teenager, and even when you are, when you're a young adult, whatever years you are right now. It's the same thing. Like if you ask, like, I don't know about you, but most people, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, it has probably changed over time, because as they continue to evolve and to know themselves. And so it is something that has changed over time. And so you find you probably want to become a programmer. Like, for instance, that I wanted to become a programmer when I was I was about 10 years old, and then I went to high school, and then from then I want to become a quantum physicist or a quantum mechanics. Yes, don't laugh, but I did want to become a science nerd. There was a point in time I wanted to become an architect or an advertiser and a marketer. I went to school to do my first degree, which I dropped out, was a financial engineering degree, and then I switched from that one, well, because of several reasons, but I switched from that one or was forced to, and then went to kind of do like medical background. So I'm actually a graduate molecular biologist, but hey, here I am creating YouTube channels on how to start an expert business. So people change a lot of times in their lives, and they evolve, and it's okay, right? Because nobody has a manual for this life, and we just always try one thing or another to see where we can kind of find our footing in this life. And so it is okay. So there's no commitment here, there's no marital contract here, there's no contract or life contract, or whatever it is that you pick, that you have to stick with it for the next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years of your life until you grow your hair turns white and gray and whatever color it turns. And so there's no that, there's not like a permanent commitment for you to do this thing. So you're free to change in the next 1 year, 6 months, wherever it is. The goal here is to pick something. Okay. One of the things that I learned even I was working online for the first 6 years is that the quicker you can get your decision, or you can make a decision, the quicker it is that you can find out if it's the wrong decision and actually adjust, instead of just holding on to that indecision and not deciding on anything. Because what happens is time usually goes by and then you're left, something that should have taken you 1 year, or because you can imagine the progress you could have made in 1 year. But the problem is you haven't decided on anything. So it takes you 1 year to decide on something, and so you're 1 year behind already. So if there's a timeline, for like you're supposed to do it in like 1 year, that you find that you've delayed 1 year just before starting. And so I had to get to this point, which is why I'm even starting this channel, is because I got tired of actually, being indecisive in terms of what I should pick, because there's always this thought of perfection, of thinking that you want to be perfect, or you want to choose the perfect thing from the get-go. But that's not how life works. Okay, that's not how life works. Because I can even imagine that most of you, the degree that you chose to study in, in college or in university or whatever you want to call it, it's probably not the area that you're working in right now in your life. And so the only lesson I've learned is done is better than perfect. Okay, done is better than perfect. So pick something, decide on it, do it, and then move on. And then later on you can decide whether it's good enough for you or it's not good enough for you. So that's the idea. Pick something and do it. Now, so by now you should have a list of things that you're really good at or remotely interested in. And I have mine. That's how I came up with this channel. Now remember, like I said, these are life centers. You're free to change it anytime you like. But all I'm asking for, or I'm going to suggest, is that you stick to it for at least 6 months to at least 5 years, whatever time period you decide in between that time, and see if it is something that you can continue keeping up with the momentum, and see, if you can keep, the rolling stone keep going. Okay. And so that's the idea here. Just decide on something and stick to it. Now, here's the thing. This is what I really like to do. So this is how I came up with this decision, and this is what led me to actually start this channel. So for now, I said to, talk about starting an expert business, helping you people, or helping you, all my listeners, start an expert business, make something of yourselves, to do something, to be something, and to actually make something, or create a business, a profitable business, doing whatever it is that you love. And so that's kind of the whole point of this thing, is to help you guys unearth whatever hidden potentials that you have within you that you've always wanted to bring out, and turn that into actually a business, an online business which works for you. And that way you don't have to work a day in your life. And so this is my journey basically, and I'm sharing everything as I learn. I haven't made it yet, but I'm in the process. I am the end result is not so much. The goal here is not the end result. The goal here is a person you can become. And so here's the thing: wherever you are in your life right now, you're there because that is the version that you are now. But there's another version of yours that takes a bit of time, that takes a bit of courage for you to unearth. And so for me, this is the same thing that I'm doing here. I'm taking a leap of faith and actually just doing this so that I can see the possibilities of what this can become. So 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, or even 20 years from now, or however long this is, for the next 1 year. So I'm just keeping my options open, but I'm actually committing to it, to learning something. And actually, this is kind of my commitment to actually doing something about it. And so for now, I intend to talk about my journey in creating an expert business, helping experts like you make money doing what they love. Now, as a side note, like most of you guys, I had trouble deciding on, what kind of topic I should cover. So this is how I kind of picked something. So I decided to pick something, I don't mind doing for the next 3 to 5 years. So if you're struggling to pick a topic or about what your channel is going to be about, that's the formula I suggest you guys to use. Just decide on something that you can do within the next 6 months to 5 years, and then, just stick to it that long and see if it is something profitable or not. Now, so that's what I did to pick. So out of those topics that you picked in the last episode, just assign a year next to them, whether between 6 months and 5 years. And so just be honest about it and see and ask yourself, do you see yourself doing this for the next 6 months, or for the next 1 year, for the next 2 years, for the next 3 years? And whatever it is that you can see yourself doing, like for a long period of time, like about 5 years, 3 to 5 years, there, pick that one and just go ahead. Okay. And just start without. The same thing that I've done with myself, that I've done with this channel, is just sort of pick something and then do that now. But after I did that, this is where the problem came. And if you notice, the name of this episode is "But I'm Not an Expert." And that's one of the biggest roadblocks, or one of the hurdles that I've had to face, whereby acknowledging, in my point of view, in my limited point of view, that I am not an expert. At least I don't think I am yet, anyway. But to think of it just for clarity or for clarification, I'm not an expert in the traditional sense, because when you talk about an expert in the traditional sense, you have to really know, like, who is an expert. Let's just pause there and ask ourselves, like, let's answer this question: who really is an expert? Well, for most people, your perception of an expert is somebody who has spent a significant amount of their time acquiring knowledge and certain skills, in a particular area of study or a particular subject, and have applied that knowledge to the extent that their opinion is valid when it comes to that subject matter, so to speak. And so some people would characterize an expert as someone who spent thousands of hours mastering a subject or a subject area. Okay, so if you're a pianist, probably spend thousands of hours learning to play the piano for maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, even 10 years. If you're a classical pianist, even longer probably. If you're a musician, you probably spend time singing and, doing your vocals and whatnot. If you're a chef, you probably spend decades in, I don't know, is it called chef school or whatnot, but starting to become a chef, and then, going and actually working as a chef. And so there's this perception whereby there's a time factor that is involved to establish, or, to kind of put a stamp on your name or behind your name that you are an expert in this particular area. For some people, an expert is somebody with a title. Okay, so a CEO of a company is probably an expert in their eyes, or, or the author of a book is probably an expert, or a doctor is an expert. Whether it's in, like a postdoctorate or a medical doctor. So some people it is a title, some people it's about a qualification. But here's the thing. Now, as I am right now, I've been working online for the past 6 years, doing all sorts of odd jobs, freelancing here and there as a content creator, writing a lot of the time. And so I decided to try this. And so even as I've been acquiring knowledge over the years, it took me a while to get to a place where I can actually, just go into the deep and actually try these things. And so, in essence, I am kind of new here. And so, if I'm not wrong, most of you guys are new here. There's probably something that you've been geeking out on for the past few decades, months, or weeks, or however long it is, but you haven't actually, taken the leap of faith and actually started doing it, or doing it in public. And so, for most of you guys, you're new here. You want to make, you know what you want. You want to make money doing what you love. You're tired of your 9-to-5 job. You're trying to look for something that, gives you joy in the morning, that brings the fulfillment and satisfaction to help you actually go on. And that is okay. And, you may not feel like an expert because you might think, you don't have any credentials, you don't have any qualifications, you don't have a title to your name, you don't have any experience, you don't have any results to show for them. You have zero testimonies. You're basically brand spanking new, and you're trying to do something for yourself, but you're worried that people will not look at you as an expert because you don't feel like an expert just yet. But the only reason I was able to actually start this channel and actually start recording videos is because I had a shift in my perspective, whereby you guys know the phrase "beauty is in the eyes of the beholder." Well, I like to suggest an alteration to that, or a change or a modification to that phrase, whereby expertise is in the eyes of the beholder. Okay, now, you need to understand something. Okay. I just think about when you're in high school, and let's say you had a brother or a sister who was several years behind you. Now, in their eyes, when they come and ask you a question about how to do this or how to do that, and then you show them, in their eyes, you're an expert. But in the eyes of people who are more advanced than you, people who are a few years ahead of you, you're not an expert, you're just somebody who's knowledgeable. But the knowledge gap can be visible when people are above you. But when people are kind of, behind you in terms of knowledge and time period that you've, spent acquiring that knowledge, then in their eyes, you look like an expert. And so you find that the reason why a medical doctor is an expert when it comes to medicine is because they spent 7 years in medical school, or I don't know, maybe 8 years in medical school, depending on where you're from, studying medicine. And so the difference here is you're at this point, you haven't even got into medical school, and this guy has already done 8 years in medical school. So yes, they're an expert in your eyes because they've already committed themselves to studying medicine for 8 years. And so in their eyes, or in your eyes, they're an expert. And so a medical doctor, even in their first year, because of the knowledge of anatomy and how the human body works, the limited knowledge, even if they earn that knowledge within that 1 year period, they can still teach you something. And so in your eyes, they're an expert, especially if you're trying to go into the same field as they are. And so if you're trying to become a medical doctor, you just straight off, you just finished high school and you're trying to go into medical school, this guy who's been there for 1 year can teach you a lot. And so in their eyes, you're a medical. And so in their eyes, you're a medical doctor being 1 year ahead of them. So that's the idea I'm trying to get across here. So the same with beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Expertise is in the eyes of the beholder. As long as you're teaching, or as long as you're preaching to people who don't know, or who are at least a level ahead of them, then you're an expert in their eyes. And now you might be wondering, like, okay, sure, you're teaching people about, you are just slightly above them or slightly ahead of them. So let's say if you're a chef, you've probably learned about cooking for maybe a year or so, or even you're just starting out right now. But you see the commitment when you actually start consuming books and watching different YouTube channels and listening to different podcasts on how to cook and how, the different tips and techniques. To somebody who's never done it before, you're an expert in their eyes. And whatever tip you can share is actually very valuable to them. Now, I don't feel like an expert just said that is okay. But now the problem here is, the other thing you might be wondering is, who's going to be listening to your channel. But here's the thing, or here's what I'm planning to do. I know that people are going to be listening to this episode, even as I produce them. It might take some time for them to come by. I know they will be. But here's the thing, I'm doing it for myself first. So that's what I suggest for yourself. Do it for yourself first, and let other people decide whether or not it is useful, or whether or not you're an expert. Because like I said, an expert is in the eyes of the beholder. And so you let other people decide whether you're getting valuable information from you, or the same when you went to learn about whatever topic it is, whether it is being a chef or learning to play the piano by ear, you found somebody online and then you decided this was an expert that I would like to learn from. And so you allow people that freedom to actually decide on whether or not you're an expert in their eyes. Your job here is to make the commitment to actually studying and improve the level of knowledge, like we said, what an expert is, and improve your knowledge and your skill set. That way, given a significant amount of time, you'd actually become better. And this is one of the things that I learned. If you study, if you improve yourself by 1% each and every single day, at the end of the year, you're going to be 30-something plus better than you were at the start of the year. And to everybody else who hasn't committed themselves to actually improving themselves in that manner, you are 30-something% better than them in that specific area, or more knowledgeable in that specific area, or more expert than them in that specific area. And so your goal here, or the biggest thing that I'd like to encourage you guys, even as I continue to do this myself, because I'm also learning as I'm doing this. So I'm teaching as I'm learning as I'm doing it. So it's kind of like a practical situation whereby I invite you guys to come with me on this journey, and then I'll tell you, hard truths, the raw plain truth, what works, what doesn't work. And so instead of being a how-to guide, is how I do this. And so that it can be an inspirational and education experience, or as I invite you guys in this journey is, you're trying to become experts in whatever fields that you've decided on. So I challenge you, and the same way I'm challenging myself, to challenge yourself. Ignore whatever it is that you want to ignore. The thing about being an expert, the qualifications, the credentials, ignore them. Just say your brand spanking new. Your commitment is to use whatever channel you decide, whether it is YouTube or podcast, or even blogging, whatever channel it is you do. The goal here is to share your knowledge. So basically just writing notes as you consume them, as you understand them, to help somebody else in the future do the same thing. And so that's pretty much the goal that we have here. And so if you don't feel like an expert yet, that's okay. I'm not telling you to become an expert overnight. What I'm suggesting, the same thing that I'm doing, is to learn and share at the same time. Because after all, one of the best ways to learn is to teach. So that's the thing. So as you learn, write your notes down, produce them on your blog, write them down on your YouTube channel or whatever it is. Just start out a blog, start a podcast, whatever it is, and actually just share your knowledge online. All right, guys. Thank you for that episode. Thank you for watching me, guys. And look forward to telling you guys about the next episode, where we're going to be talking about how to actually establish your expertise. Well, at least I think that is it, because it might change. So stick around and find out what's going to be next. Bye.